You are sentenced to exile.
My lunar mark burns through!
What is this power?
I lay bombers as queen!
Welcome back to Tina Romance Library, where powerful alphas fall hard, and the women they underestimate change everything. Every story here is complete, immersive, and emotion-driven. No cliffhangers, no rushed endings, just full romances you can sink into. So if you love possessive alphas, strong heroines who don't beg, slow, burn, tension, emotional payoffs, and stories that actually finish, you're in the right place. I need you to join the pack right now by subscribing, leave a like if you enjoy immersive romance, and settle in because once the story begins, we don't stop until the ending. Now, let's get into it. They dragged me in chains. The stone floor was so cold it burned. That's the first thing I remember. Not the shouting, not the hands that grabbed me from my bed in the dead hours before dawn. Not even the iron cuffs that bit into my wrists like hungry teeth. No, it was the cold. The kind that seeps through thin cotton and settles into your bones, making a home there, reminding you that you are small and powerless, and at the mercy of forces so much larger than yourself. They didn't bother being gentle. Why would they? I was Omega, the lowest of the low, the kind of wolf the pack notices only when they need someone to blame. And apparently, this time, I was very noticeable indeed. The great hall of the Silvercrest pack had never felt so enormous. Vaulted ceilings that stretched up into shadow, torches that flickered and danced, casting everyone in shades of amber and gold, everyone except me. I was on my knees in the center of it all, a splash of gray in my thin nightdress, shivering not entirely from cold. The chains connecting my wrists to the floor rattled every time I breathed, a metallic whisper that punctuated the murmurs rippling through the crowd. They'd all come to watch. Of course they had. My trial was the best entertainment they'd had in months. I kept my eyes down at first, studying the grooves in the stone, the places where centuries of feet had worn the rock smooth. I counted the links in my chains, 37 from wrist to floor. Funny, the things your mind fixates on when everything else is too big, too terrible to process. Someone coughed. The whispers grew louder. Always knew she was trouble. Caught red-handed, I heard. About time someone dealt with her. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. The pain helped. It gave me something to focus on besides the crushing weight of what was happening. Treason. They were accusing me of treason. Apparently, treason looks a lot like breathing wrong when you're Omega. Like existing in a space where people have decided you don't belong. Like surviving when they'd prefer you didn't. I'd spent my entire life trying to be invisible, and the one time it actually mattered, I'd failed spectacularly. The irony wasn't lost on me. A heavy door groaned open at the far end of the hall, and the whispers died instantly, choked off like someone had wrapped a hand around the room's throat. Even the torches seemed to still, their flames freezing mid-flicker. He was here. I didn't need to look up to know. I could feel it, that strange electric pull I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. The air itself changed when he entered a room, grew thicker, harder to breathe, charged with something I didn't have words for. The Alpha King. Footsteps echoed across the stone. Steady, measured, each one a hammer strike against my ribs. I kept my eyes down. I'd perfected that particular skill over the years. The downward gaze, the hunched shoulders, the art of making yourself so small that maybe, just maybe, they'd forget you were there. It had kept me alive this long, kept me fed, sheltered, breathing, but it had never kept me safe. Nothing could do that. Not when you were born Omega in a world that valued strength above all else. Not when your wolf was so weak she barely whispered in your mind, a ghost of what she should be. The footsteps stopped. I knew without looking that he was ascending the throne, an ancient seat of carved oak and silver, positioned on a raised platform so the Alpha King could look down on his subjects, so he could pass judgment from on high. The silence stretched. Seconds became minutes, became an eternity. My knees ached. The cold from the stone had traveled up through my legs, settling into my hips, my spine, I wondered distantly if I'd even be able to stand when they finally asked me to. If they asked me to, maybe they'd just kill me here, kneeling, chained like an animal. Would that be poetic justice? The Omega who'd spent her whole life on her knees, dying in the same position? I almost laughed. The sound stayed trapped in my chest, bitter and sharp. Raise your head. The voice cut through the silence like a blade deep, commanding, edged with something I couldn't name. Something that made my wolf stir for the first time in days, lifting her head in my mind with a whimper. My body obeyed before my brain could catch up. Muscle memory, years of conditioning. When an alpha spoke, you listened. When the alpha king spoke, you moved. I lifted my head, and immediately wished I hadn't. He was exactly as I remembered. Exactly as he'd been in every accidental glimpse I'd stolen over the years. Every moment I'd allowed myself to look before training my gaze elsewhere. Devastating. That was the word that always came to mind. Not handsome, though he was that too, in a brutal, sharp-edged way. Not attractive, though attraction was too mild a word for what I felt when I looked at him. Devastating. Like a force of nature. Like something that could destroy you without even trying. Dark hair that fell just past his collar. A jaw that could have been carved from granite. Eyes the color of a winter storm, gray and cold and infinite. Those eyes were locked on mine now. The impact nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. I'd felt his gaze before, of course. You couldn't exist in the same pack as KL Silvercrest without occasionally falling under his notice. But those moments had been fleeting: a glance in the dining hall, a sweep of his eyes across a crowded room. They'd felt impersonal, cursory. This was different. This was weight and pressure and intensity. This was being seen, truly seen, maybe for the first time in my life. I hated it. I hated that even now, even here, with my life hanging by a thread, my traitorous heart still stuttered when he looked at me, that my wolf still whined with something that felt dangerously close to longing. I'd told myself for years that what I felt when he entered a room was fear, that the racing pulse, the shallow breathing, the strange heat that bloomed in my chest, it was all self-preservation, instinct, the natural response of prey in the presence of a predator. I'd been lying to myself, and I'd been so wrong. His jaw tightened, just slightly, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. Something passed between us in that moment, something unsaid, unspoken, crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Then he looked away, and I could breathe again. "Proceed," he said, his voice flat, empty of inflection. The court official, a thin man with a pointed face and eyes like black beetles, stepped forward, unfurling a scroll with an unnecessary flourish. "The Omega known as Sarah," he began, and I flinched at the sound of my name in his mouth, made ugly and small, "stands accused of treason against the Silvercrest pack, of conspiring with rogues beyond our borders, of passing pack secrets to our enemies, of..." The list went on, and on. Each accusation was more ridiculous than the last, more impossible. I almost laughed again. Almost. Because what secrets could I possibly have? I was Omega. I cleaned floors and washed dishes and kept my head down. The most sensitive information I had access to was which guards preferred their meat rare, and which council members liked honey in their tea. I was nobody. Nothing. But that was the point, wasn't it? When bad things happened, when plans went wrong, when someone needed to be punished, you found the weakest link. You found the one person who couldn't fight back. You found the Omega. I'd seen it happen before, to others like me. Accusations without proof, trials without fairness, sentences handed down like inevitabilities. I'd watched from the shadows, grateful it wasn't me, hating myself for that gratitude. Now it was my turn. The official finished reading. The charges hung in the air, heavy and damning. "Witnesses," Kale said. They came forward one by one. People I'd served, people I'd smiled at, people who'd smiled back. They lied. Every single one of them lied. I saw her speaking with a stranger at the eastern border. I'd never been to the eastern border in my life. She had papers, documents with pack information. I couldn't read beyond basic words. Everyone knew that. She admitted it to me, confessed her betrayal. I hadn't spoken to that man in months. On and on it went. A parade of false witnesses, each one adding another nail to my coffin. I stopped listening after a while. Let their words wash over me like rain, like something that happened to someone else, somewhere far away. Instead, I focused on staying upright, on keeping my spine straight despite the chains, despite the cold, despite the crushing certainty of what was coming. I'd never begged in my life, not for food when I was hungry, not for mercy when I was beaten, not for kindness when I was alone. Begging never worked, not for omegas, not for people like me. So I didn't start now. My eyes drifted back to the throne, almost against my will. He was watching again. That storm-gray gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. His hands gripped the arms of his throne, knuckles white against the dark wood. What was he thinking? Did he believe them? Did he care? Did it matter? He was Alpha King. His word was law. If he decided I was guilty, I was guilty. If he decided I should die, I would die. The witnesses finished. The official turned to Kale, waiting. The hall held its breath. The evidence is clear, someone from the council called out. She must be sentenced. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Death, another voice added. It's the only way. More agreement. Louder now. They were hungry for it. Hungry for blood and justice and the satisfaction of watching someone fall. I felt strangely calm. If this was how I ended, chained and accused, condemned for crimes I didn't commit, then fine. I couldn't stop it, couldn't change it, but I could choose how I met it. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin higher. If this was how I ended, I would end standing. Even on my knees, I would stand. Kael's eyes met mine one last time, and for just a moment so brief I might have imagined it something cracked in that cold, controlled expression. Something that looked almost like pain, the weight of his gaze. Then his mouth opened, and I braced for the words that would end me. Clear the hall. Silence. The kind that screams. The council member who'd been calling for my death sputtered. Your Majesty, the sentence must be... I said clear the hall. Kael's voice dropped an octave, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet with it. The Alpha command rolled through the space like thunder, undeniable and absolute. People moved. They had no choice. When an Alpha King spoke with that much power behind his words, your body obeyed even if your mind protested. I watched them file out the council members with their indignant faces, the witnesses who'd lied so easily, the crowd who'd come for a show. They cast glances back over their shoulders, hungry and disappointed, like children being sent away before dessert. The heavy doors groaned shut. And then there were two. The silence that followed their departure was different. Heavier. It pressed against my ears, made my pulse hammer in my throat. Kael hadn't moved from his throne, hadn't spoken. He just sat there, watching me with those impossible eyes, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. I should have been terrified. Alone with the Alpha King, chained and accused, no witnesses to whatever came next. But terror wasn't what coiled in my stomach. It was something else entirely. Something that made my skin feel too tight, my lungs too small. Minutes crawled by, or maybe it was only seconds. Time had gone strange, elastic. Stand. The command was softer this time. No alpha power behind it. Just a request. Almost. My legs screamed in protest as I tried to rise. The chains didn't give me much room to maneuver, and the cold had settled so deep into my joints that everything felt stiff, clumsy. I made it halfway up before my knee buckled. I would have hit the stone again if he hadn't moved. One moment he was on his throne, unreachable and distant. The next he was there, right there, one hand gripping my upper arm, steadying me. The touch burned. Not painfully, not the way iron burns or fire burns. This was different, electric. Like every nerve ending in my arm suddenly woke up and started screaming. My wolf, my pathetic, barely, Their wolf who'd done nothing but sleep for most of my life, surged forward in my mind with a whimper that sounded dangerously close to recognition. No, 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 no. I yanked away from his touch, or tried to. The chains made it more of a desperate stumble. I caught my balance, barely, and forced myself upright without his help. "I'm fine," I said. My voice came out rougher than I'd intended, defensive. His hand hovered in the space where I'd been for a moment before dropping to his side. His expression was unreadable, that careful, controlled mask he always wore. But his eyes were storms. "You're not fine," he said quietly. "You're freezing. You've been kneeling on stone for over an hour, and you're about to collapse." I said I'm fine. I lifted my chin, met his gaze even though everything in me screamed to look away. "If you're going to kill me, just do it. The dramatic buildup is getting old." Something flickered across his face, too fast to name. Then, impossibly, his mouth twitched, just barely. The ghost of something that might have been amusement in another life, another circumstance. "You think I brought you here to kill you? Didn't you? If I wanted you dead, Sarah, you'd already be dead." The sound of my name in his mouth did something dangerous to my composure. He'd never said it before, never had reason to. I was Omega. He was Alpha King. We existed in completely different worlds, even though we breathed the same air. Hearing it now, in that deep voice, shaped by lips I definitely shouldn't be staring at, it cracked something open inside my chest. "Then what do you want?" I asked. "The truth." I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out bitter and sharp, echoing in the empty hall. "The truth? You just sat there and watched a dozen people lie about me, watched them invent crimes I couldn't have committed even if I'd wanted to. And now you want the truth?" "I want your truth." He stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell pine and smoke and something darker, wilder. "Tell me what happened." "What happened?" I shook my head, chains rattling. "What happened is I was born wrong, born weak. And when the pack needed someone to blame for whatever actually went wrong, because something did go wrong, didn't it? Something bad enough that they needed a scapegoat, they picked the easiest target." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters." My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. I didn't do what they said. Any of it. I've never been to the eastern border. I can barely read, so whatever documents they're claiming I stole are fiction. And I haven't conspired with anyone because no one talks to me long enough to conspire about anything. He studied my face like he was trying to read something written there in invisible ink. "I know," he said finally. The words hit me like a physical blow. "You, what?" "I know you didn't do it." His jaw tightened again, that muscle jumping. "The charges are fabricated. The witnesses were coached. Someone is setting you up, and they're doing a thorough job of it." I stared at him. My brain couldn't process the words, couldn't make them make sense. "If you know I'm innocent, then why?" My voice rose, anger flooding in to fill the space where fear had been. "Why did you let them do this? Why did you sit there and let them lie? Why am I still in chains?" "Because I can't just dismiss the charges without proof." His voice hardened. "Because the council is already questioning my authority. Because there are forces in this pack working against me. And if I show favoritism to an accused traitor without concrete evidence, I lose what little political ground I have left." "Favoritism?" The word came out strangled. "You call this favoritism? Compared to what they wanted to do to you?" His eyes flashed. "Yes." The weight of that statement settled over me like a heavy cloak. What did they want? Execution. Immediate. Public. Each word was clipped, controlled. They wanted your head on a spike by sunset as a warning to other would-be traitors. My stomach lurched. "But you stopped them." "I delayed them." He dragged a hand through his dark hair, frustration cracking through that careful control. "There's a difference." "Why?" The question hung between us. Simple, complicated, everything. He looked at me for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, softened in a way I'd never seen before. "Because every instinct I have is screaming that you're innocent," he said quietly. Because I've watched you for years, and you're not capable of treason. My heart stopped. You've watched me? His jaw clenched. He looked away, staring at something over my shoulder. Everyone notices the Alpha King, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. But the Alpha King doesn't notice Omegas. We're beneath attention, beneath notice. I noticed. The words came out rough, almost angry. I've always noticed. The air between us had gone electric again, charged with something I didn't dare name. He moved closer, and this time I didn't pull away. Couldn't. My feet had forgotten how to work. When you started in the kitchens 5 years ago, he said, his voice low. You burned your hand on a pot, 2nd-degree burn. You wrapped it in cloth and kept working because you were too afraid to ask for help. I remembered that day. Remembered biting back tears as I scrubbed dishes with my burned palms, screaming. How did you? I sent the healer to you that night. Told her to make it seem like coincidence. He was close enough now that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. 2 years ago you got sick. Fever that lasted for days. You still showed up for your shifts, shaking and pale, because you were terrified they'd replace you if you rested. You couldn't have known that. I had food sent to your room. Medicine. I made sure your shifts were covered. His hand lifted, and this time when his fingers brushed my arm, I didn't pull away. You've been beaten by pack members who thought it was funny to hurt someone who couldn't fight back. I made sure those pack members were punished. Quietly. You never knew because I couldn't let you know. Couldn't let anyone know. My mouth had gone dry. Why not? Because noticing you was dangerous. His thumb traced a small circle on my arm, the touch so light it might have been imaginary. Except I felt it everywhere. Because caring about you was impossible. Because you were Omega and I was Alpha King, and there are rules, expectations, politics that make anything between us. He cut himself off. Jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard teeth crack. Make anything between us what? I pushed, my voice barely audible. His eyes met mine, and the storm there had turned into something else entirely. Something that made my wolf whine and my pulse race and my breath catch. Forbidden. The word hung in the space between us like a confession. My chained hands trembled. His gaze dropped to them, and something dark crossed his face. Anger. No fury. Cold and lethal, and directed at the iron binding my wrists. He reached for the chains. Don't, I said quickly. If you remove them now, the council will. I don't care what the council will do. You should. I held his gaze, even as my heart hammered. You said it yourself. You remove these chains without proof of my innocence. You lose political ground. You've delayed my execution. Don't waste that by doing something rash. His hands closed around the chains instead, his fingers brushing mine. The contact shot through me like lightning. My wolf, silent for so long she'd been little more than a memory, suddenly howled. The sound reverberated through my mind, primal and possessive, and absolutely certain. Mate. No. No. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. Alpha Kings didn't have Omega mates. The bond was sacred, rare, and it always paired equals. Alphas with alphas, betas with betas. Not this. Never this. But my wolf didn't care about logic or rules or impossibilities. She was awake for the first time in my life, truly awake, and she was singing. Kale's eyes had gone wide. His grip on the chains tightened, knuckles white. Tell me you don't feel that, he said roughly. I couldn't tell him that because it would be a lie, and I was so tired of lies. This isn't possible, I whispered instead. I know. You're Alpha King. I know. And I'm mine. The word came out like a growl, and the alpha power behind it made my knees weak. You're mine. The doors to the great hall burst open with a crash that made me flinch. The council flooded back in like a dark tide, their faces eager and sharp. They'd been waiting, prowling outside like wolves circling prey, barely contained by the Alpha King's command. Kale's hand released the chains so quickly you'd think they'd burned him. He stepped back, putting distance between us, and the cold rushed in to fill the space where his warmth had been. His face had gone carefully blank again, that mask sliding back into place like armor, but I'd seen beneath it now. I'd felt the truth in his touch, heard it in his voice. Mine, the words still echoed in my head, primal and possessive and completely insane. "Your Majesty," the beetle-eyed official said, his voice dripping false courtesy. "We await your judgment." Kael ascended the throne again, each step measured and deliberate. When he sat, he looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful, remote, untouchable. Nothing like the man who'd touched my chains with shaking hands moments ago. "The Omega will be held for further questioning," he announced. His voice carried across the hall, flat and authoritative, confined to the cells until— The cells? The council member who'd called for my death earlier stepped forward, his jowls quivering with indignation. "Your Majesty, the evidence is clear. The sentence will be determined when I have all the facts." Kael's eyes flashed dangerously. "Or are you questioning my authority, Councilman Thorne?" Thorne's face went purple, but he stepped back. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely suggest that leniency in cases of treason sets a dangerous precedent. Your suggestion is noted." Each word was edged in ice. "And dismissed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Discontent, hunger for blood left unsatisfied. I knelt there in my chains, trying to process what was happening. He was protecting me. Again. Buying time he'd said he didn't have. Spending political capital he'd claimed he couldn't afford to waste. Why? I knew why. My wolf knew why. She was still singing in my mind, a constant hum of certainty that made my skin feel too tight. But knowing and accepting were different things entirely. Heat bloomed in my chest, just a flicker at first, like a candle flame cupped in trembling hands. I ignored it. Stress, probably. Fear. The aftermath of whatever had just passed between Kael and me. "Guards," Kael called. "Take the prisoner to—" The flame in my chest flared. Not a candle anymore. A bonfire. I gasped. The sound strangled. My hands clenched, chains rattling. The heat was spreading, racing through my veins like liquid fire, burning away everything in its path. "Sarah?" I heard him say my name, heard the throne creak as he stood. But the sound seemed distant, muffled, like I was underwater. The fire reached my spine and I arched, biting back a scream. What was happening to me? My wolf wasn't just singing anymore. She was howling, wild and fierce, throwing herself against the cage I'd kept her in for years. The cage that had kept her small, quiet, manageable. She wanted out. No, she was getting out. "Something's wrong." That was Thorne's voice, sharp with suspicion. "She's doing something. Stop her." I wasn't doing anything. I couldn't do anything. The fire had taken control, and all I could do was endure as it consumed me from the inside out. My skin began to glow. Soft at first, just a shimmer, like moonlight on water. Then brighter, brighter. The chains around my wrists started to smoke where they touched my skin. Someone shouted. Multiple someones. The words tangled together, meaningless. The fire reached my collarbone and I did scream then. Couldn't hold it back anymore. The sound tore from my throat, raw and primal, echoing off the stone walls. But I didn't fall. Every instinct screamed at me to collapse, to curl into myself, to make the pain stop. But something deeper, something ancient and absolute kept me upright, kept my spine straight even as agony ripped through me. If I was going to burn, I would burn standing. Light exploded across my skin in patterns I couldn't see but could feel. Intricate, deliberate, like invisible hands were carving symbols into my flesh with blades made of starlight. The Luna mark. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. The same way you know your own name, your own heartbeat. This was the mark of the true Luna, the Alpha King's destined mate. It was appearing on me, on the Omega, on the lowest, weakest wolf in the pack. Impossible. The light grew blinding. I squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't matter. The brightness existed behind my eyelids, inside my skull, woven into my very bones. Dimly, through the roaring in my ears, I heard chaos erupt. Shouting, running footsteps, someone calling for the healer, for the guards, for someone to do something. And beneath it all, cutting through everything else like a blade through silk, a roar, deep and feral and absolutely enraged. The sound of an alpha losing control. The pressure in the room changed instantly. The air grew thick, heavy, saturated with power that made my knees want to buckle even through the fire consuming me. Kyle. I forced my eyes open, squinting against the light still pouring from my skin. He was coming toward me, and he wasn't walking anymore. He was stalking, predatory and lethal, every muscle coiled tight. His eyes had gone full wolf, that winter gray swallowed by amber gold that seemed to glow from within. Guards moved to intercept him, whether to protect me or protect the sanctity of the trial. I couldn't tell. He snarled at them. Actually snarled, teeth bared, the sound more animal than man. They scattered. "Your Majesty, you must not," Thorn started. "Touch her and die." The words came out guttural, barely recognizable as human speech. "All of you, step back or I will tear you apart." The threat wasn't empty. I could see it in every line of his body, could smell the violence rolling off him in waves. He meant every word. The crowd scrambled backward, putting distance between themselves and their alpha king who'd apparently lost his mind. Kale reached me and dropped to his knees. The sight of the alpha king kneeling for anyone, let alone for me, sent shockwaves through the hall. Gasps, whispers that rose in pitch toward hysteria. He didn't seem to notice or care. His hands hovered over my arms, not quite touching, like he was afraid his contact might hurt me. The fury in his eyes warred with something else. Fear. He was afraid for me. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice rough. "Sarah, breathe." I hadn't realized I'd stopped. I dragged in air, and it felt like swallowing glass. The light was fading now, slowly. The fire in my veins cooling from inferno to simmer, from simmer to warmth, from warmth to something almost bearable. I looked down at my skin. Marks covered my arms, my collarbone, disappearing beneath the neckline of my dress. They were luminous, silver white, like someone had traced constellations across my flesh. Beautiful, terrifying, undeniable. The chains around my wrists had melted where they'd touched the marks. Molten iron dripped to the stone, hissing and spitting. I was free. The irony would have made me laugh if I had the breath for it. Kale's hands finally made contact, gripping my shoulders gently. His touch was fire of a different kind, not burning, but blazing. My wolf surged toward him with a desperation that stole what little breath I'd managed to reclaim. "What did you do to her?" Thorn's voice cut through the moment, shrill with accusation. "This is witchcraft. Dark magic. She must be—" Kale's head snapped toward the councilman, and the look in his eyes would have made a smarter man run. "Witchcraft?" His voice had gone deadly quiet, more terrifying than any roar. "You dare call the Lunamark witchcraft?" The hall went silent. Absolutely, completely silent. That's not possible." Thorn's face had gone gray. "She's Omega. The Lunamark only appears on the Alpha King's true mate." Kale rose to his feet, pulling me up with him. His arm wrapped around my waist, supporting me when my legs threatened to give out. Chosen by the moon herself. Blessed by ancient law that predates this pack, this kingdom, this petty council. He turned, still holding me against his side, and addressed the hall. When he spoke, his voice rang with alpha command that made every wolf present snap to attention. "You wanted to execute my mate." Not a question. A statement. Cold. Factual. Devastating. "You brought false charges against the woman the moon chose for me. You lied. You conspired. You attempted to murder the future Luna Queen." The accusations hung in the air like an executioner's blade. "Your Majesty," another council member ventured weakly. "We didn't know. You didn't care to know." Kale's arm tightened around me. Possessive. Protective. "You saw an Omega and decided her life was worthless, that she could be sacrificed to cover for your incompetence, Your failures, your treachery. Treachery? Thorn sputtered. We are loyal to the crown. Are you? Kale's eyes narrowed. Because someone in this pack conspired with rogues. Someone passed our secrets to our enemies. Someone committed the very treason you accused her of. And then you were so eager to blame the nearest Omega, so quick to call for her execution it makes me wonder what you're trying to hide. The implication landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Thorn's face went from gray to crimson. You cannot possibly suggest. I can suggest whatever I want. I'm the Alpha King. Kale's voice dropped to a growl. And right now, I'm suggesting that everyone in this hall who brought charges against my mate, who lied about her, who called for her death, you're all under suspicion. Guards. The guards who'd scattered earlier rushed forward, uncertain but obedient. Detain Councilman Thorn and every witness who testified today. Hold them for questioning, real questioning, the kind that gets to the truth. You can't do this. Thorn backed away wild-eyed. The council will never... The council serves at my pleasure. Kale's eyes flashed gold again. And right now, I'm not feeling particularly pleased. The guards moved in. Thorn tried to run and made it 3 steps before 2 massive wolves in guard uniforms brought him down. The other witnesses didn't even try. They just stood there, shock and fear etched across their faces as they were placed in the same iron chains that had bound me moments ago. Poetic justice, my wolf purred. She was still awake, still present, and she was viciously satisfied. I watched it all happen in a daze. The hall that had been calling for my death minutes ago had descended into chaos. Council members arguing, guards shouting orders, witnesses being dragged away in chains. And in the center of it all, Kale held me. His thumb traced small circles on my hip, a gesture so gentle it contrasted sharply with the fury in his voice as he issued commands. Clear the hall, he ordered again. All of you, now. This time, no one argued. They fled like rabbits before a wolf, even the council members who weren't being arrested. The great doors slammed shut behind them, and blessed silence fell once more. My legs finally gave out. Kale caught me before I hit the ground, sweeping me up into his arms like I weighed nothing. I've got you, he murmured against my hair. I've got you, Sarah. You're safe now. Safe. I'd never been safe a day in my life. But wrapped in his arms, the Luna marks still glowing faintly on my skin. His heartbeat steady and strong beneath my ear, I almost believed him. He carried me through corridors I'd only ever seen from the corners of my vision, head down, hurrying to the next task. Now I saw them from a different angle, wrapped in the Alpha King's arms, pressed against his chest, my cheek resting over his thundering heart. Guards snapped to attention as we passed. Their eyes widened when they saw the marks glowing faintly on my skin, but none of them spoke. None of them dared. The heat from the Luna mark's emergence had faded to a low simmer beneath my skin, but exhaustion dragged at me like an undertow. My eyelids felt heavy. My body wanted to surrender, to sink into the safety of his embrace, and let the world fade away. I forced my eyes open. Where are we going? My chambers, Kale said without breaking stride. You need rest, a healer, food, actual clothes that aren't... His jaw clenched as he looked down at my thin nightdress, now torn and dirty from hours on the stone floor. You need care. I need answers. I shifted in his arms, and he immediately adjusted his grip, gentle despite his strength. What just happened? The mark, the fire. I felt like I was burning alive, and then the mate bond manifesting. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could feel the tremor running through him. When true mates meet, when they're close enough, the moon marks them. Usually it's subtle, a warmth, a pull. Not whatever that was. No. He shouldered through a door, and suddenly we were in a room that made my breath catch. Massive, luxurious, a fireplace large enough to stand in, furniture that looked older than the pack itself, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling and overlooked the entire territory. Never like that. I've never heard of a marking so violent, so visible. He set me down carefully on a couch that was probably worth more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Then he was moving, grabbing something from a wardrobe, A cloak, thick and warm, lined with fur. He wrapped it around my shoulders with the same care someone might handle spun glass. The fabric smelled like him, pine and smoke and wild things. My wolf purred. "Better?" he asked. I nodded, pulling the cloak tighter. The weight of it, the warmth it felt like armor, like protection, like choice. He'd wrapped me in his cloak twice now. Once in the hall, once here. An alpha sharing his scent, his warmth, his protection with an omega. It should have felt like ownership. It felt like reverence. Kale moved to the fireplace, bracing his hands on the mantel, his back to me. The muscles in his shoulders were rigid with tension. "You should hate me," he said quietly. "What?" "I watched them drag you into that hall, watched them chain you, accuse you, lie about you. I sat on that throne and I did nothing while they called for your death." His hands clenched into fists. "You should hate me for that. You were playing politics." The words came out sharper than I intended. "You said it yourself. If you'd defended me without proof, you'd have lost ground with the council. And that matters more than you?" He turned to face me, and the anguish in his eyes stole my breath. "I prioritize politics over my mate. What kind of alpha does that make me? The kind who's smart enough to keep us both alive." I stood, the cloak pooling around my feet. "If you'd claimed me immediately, before the mark appeared, what would have happened?" He said nothing. "They would have accused you of being compromised," I continued. "Of favoring an Omega traitor because of some base attraction. They would have used it against you, maybe even tried to remove you from power. And then where would we be? You dethroned, me executed, and whoever's actually guilty walking free. You're defending me." He sounded almost incredulous. "I'm being practical." I took a step toward him, then another. "You bought time. You protected me in the only way you could. And when the moon herself proved my innocence, you didn't hesitate. You claimed me in front of the entire court, arrested the people who tried to kill me, and carried me here like—" I stopped, heat flooding my cheeks. "Like what?" He closed the distance between us in 2 strides. Not touching, but close. So close. "Say it, Sarah. Like I mattered." My voice came out barely above a whisper. Like I was something precious instead of something disposable. His hand lifted, hovering near my face, asking permission. I leaned into his touch. His palm cupped my cheek, warm and calloused, and I watched something break open in his expression. Relief, wonder, hunger. "You've always mattered," he said roughly. "From the moment I first saw you, you've mattered more than you should. More than was safe, more than I knew how to handle." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Kale snarled, the sound purely animal. "What?" "Your Majesty." A guard's voice muffled through the heavy wood. "The interrogations have begun. Councilman Thorne is talking." Something dark and satisfied crossed Kale's face. "I'll be there shortly." "Your Majesty, there's more." The guard hesitated. "He's confessed to the poisoning." The room went very still. "Poisoning," I breathed. Kale's hand dropped from my face. The tenderness from moments ago vanished, replaced by something cold and deadly. 3 months ago, several pack members fell ill, he said, his voice flat, clinical. The healer couldn't determine the cause. We thought it was something in the water, maybe spoiled food. 5 died before it stopped. I remembered that. Remembered the fear that had rippled through the pack. Remembered scrubbing every surface in the kitchens until my hands bled because everyone was terrified of contamination. It wasn't illness, Kale continued. It was poison. Someone deliberately poisoned our own pack members. But why would... Understanding hit me like a fist. They needed a scapegoat. Someone to blame when the truth started coming out. An Omega who worked in the kitchens. His eyes met mine. Someone with access to food and water. Someone no one would question. Someone whose death wouldn't matter. Rage built in my chest, hot and fierce. So they framed me for their crime, and would have succeeded if the mate bond hadn't manifested when it did. He turned back toward the door. Stay here. Rest. I'll handle Thorne. No. He froze. Sarah, No, I repeated, stronger this time. They tried to kill me. They murdered 5 pack members and were going to let me die for it. I deserve to hear the truth. You deserve to rest. His voice gentled. You've been through enough today, and I'll rest when this is finished. I straightened my spine, pulled his cloak tighter around myself. I'm your mate, Kale. Your Luna. Or I will be if... I faltered. If that's what you want. He crossed back to me in 2 strides, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that contradicted his earlier fury. If that's what I want? He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Sarah, you're my mate, chosen by the moon. There's no if. There's only choice. I covered his hands with mine. There's always choice. The moon may have marked us, but we decide what that means. We decide if we accept it. Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. And if I've already decided? If I decided years ago, watching you burn your hand and refuse help? Watching you show up sick and exhausted because you were too afraid to rest? Watching you survive in a pack that treated you like you were nothing when you were... His voice cracked. When you were everything? My throat tightened. Then I need to decide too, I whispered. And I can't do that until this is finished. Until I know the truth. Until I face the people who tried to destroy me and show them they failed. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened, almost happy. Has anyone ever told you that you're magnificent when you're angry? Despite everything, I laughed. No one's ever seen me angry. Omegas aren't allowed to be angry. You're not just Omega anymore. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, tracing the edge of one of the Luna marks. You're mine, and my mate is allowed to be anything she wants. The possessive mind should have grated, should have felt like ownership, like control. Instead, it felt like belonging. Then let's go, I said. Together. He studied me for another moment, then nodded. Together. The interrogation room was deep in the fortress, carved from the same stone as the dungeons, but somehow darker, colder. The kind of place where truth got extracted whether you wanted to give it or not. Thorn was chained to a chair in the center of the room, and seeing him bound the way I'd been bound hours ago sent vicious satisfaction through me. He looked up when we entered, and what little color remained in his face drained away. Your Majesty, please, I can explain. You confessed to poisoning pack members. Kale's voice was arctic. Explain that. Thorn's mouth worked soundlessly. Then his eyes slid to me, and hatred twisted his features. This is her fault, he spat. If she hadn't... Careful. The alpha command in Kale's voice made the walls vibrate. That's your Luna you're speaking about. She's Omega. Thorn's composure cracked completely. She's nothing. She shouldn't even be here. Shouldn't be standing there in your cloak wearing marks that should have gone to someone worthy, someone... Kale moved. One moment he was beside me. The next he had Thorn by the throat, lifting him chair and all off the ground. Say one more word about my mate, Kale growled, and they'll be sweeping up what's left of you. I should have been horrified. Should have told him to stop, but I wasn't, and I didn't. Because I'd spent my entire life listening to people like Thorn tell me I was nothing, watching them look through me like I didn't exist, accepting their casual cruelty, because fighting back would only make things worse. Watching Kale defend me, seeing the terror in Thorn's eyes as he realized his power meant nothing, here it felt like justice. The poisoning, I said calmly. Tell us about the poisoning. Kale released Thorn, who crashed back to the ground, gasping. It wasn't supposed to kill anyone, Thorn wheezed. Just make them sick. Make the pack. Question the Alpha King's ability to protect them. Political maneuvering. Disgust dripped from Kale's words. You poisoned innocent people for politics. The council needed leverage. You've been refusing our counsel, making decisions without us, acting like you don't need... Thorn cut himself off, but the damage was done. Need what? I asked. Need you, or need the council's permission to rule? Thorn glared at me, but there was fear beneath the hatred now. The Alpha King should listen to his advisors, should make decisions that benefit the pack, not just himself. And when your poisoning killed 5 people instead of just making them sick, Kael's hands clenched. When you realized you'd committed actual murder, we needed a scapegoat. Thorn's voice dropped. Someone the pack wouldn't question. Someone whose death would satisfy their need for justice without exposing the truth. And Omega, I said flatly. Someone expendable. Thorn had the audacity to sound defensive. It wasn't personal. You were just convenient. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Convenient. 5 people dead. My life nearly forfeit. All of it just politics. Just convenience. Who else? Kael demanded. You didn't do this alone. Thorn's mouth clamped shut. Tell me, or I let my Luna decide your fate. Kael glanced at me, and I suspect she's feeling far less merciful than I am right now. He was right. Standing there, looking at the man who'd orchestrated my near execution with the same casual indifference someone might show swatting a fly, I wanted him to suffer. But more than that, I wanted the truth. The others will talk, I said quietly. The witnesses you arrested. They'll confess to save themselves. They'll tell us who was involved, who paid them to lie, who planned this. You can tell us now, or you can wait in a cell while your co-conspirators sell you out one by one. Thorn's face went gray again. You're bluffing. Am I? I tilted my head. I've been invisible my whole life. I've heard things people didn't think I could hear. Seen things they didn't think I was smart enough to understand. Do you really want to gamble that I don't already know more than you think? It was a bluff. Completely. I knew nothing. But Thorn didn't know that. His shoulders sagged. Councilman Reed, Beta Marcus, Alpha Dane from the Southern Territory. They wanted to weaken the Alpha King's position, force him to rely more heavily on the Council. The poisoning was supposed to create chaos, make the pack question his leadership. And framing me? Reed's idea. Thorn wouldn't meet my eyes. You were Omega. You worked in the kitchens. You were perfect. Perfect. I'd spent my life trying to be invisible, and the one time being noticed could have saved me. Being visible had nearly killed me. Kael's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. The contact steadied me. You'll be tried publicly, Kael said to Thorn. You and every conspirator. The pack will know what you did, what you tried to do. They'll never accept her, Thorn said desperately. And Omega Luna? It's against everything. Against what? I stepped forward, and Kael's hand squeezed mine, encouraging. Against tradition? The moon herself marked me. Against nature? I'm standing here wearing marks that only appear on true mates. Against pack law? I looked at Kael. What does pack law say about the Alpha King's mate? That she is Luna, Kael said quietly. Regardless of her rank before the bond, the mate bond supersedes all other pack hierarchy. So I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not violating any traditions. I looked back at Thorn. I'm just making you uncomfortable because I wasn't born into power. Because I had to scrub floors and take beatings and survive on scraps while you sat in comfort and plotted murder. Thorn said nothing. Take him away, Kael ordered the guards. Inform me when the others are ready to confess. The guards dragged Thorn from the room, and then it was just us again. The silence felt heavy, weighted with everything unsaid. You were incredible, Kael said softly. I turned to him, and the look in his eyes made my knees weak. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but something deeper, genuine. Like watching me face down, Thorn had confirmed something he'd always known. I was terrified, I admitted. I know, he stepped closer. But you didn't let it stop you. You stood there and you demanded truth and justice like you were born to it. I wasn't born to anything except servitude. You were born to be my mate. His hands framed my face again, and I was starting to think this might be his favorite way to touch me. Born to stand beside me. Born to be exactly who you are. Strong and fierce and far too brave for your own good. My heart hammered against my ribs. Kael, I'm not asking you to accept the bond because the moon chose us, he said urgently. I'm not asking because it's law or tradition or political necessity. I'm asking because I've wanted you for years. Because watching you survive everything this pack threw at you made me fall for you long before either of us knew why. Because the thought of losing you today," his voice cracked, "it would have destroyed me." Tears burned behind my eyes. "You could have anyone," I whispered. "An alpha female who was raised for this. Someone who knows how to navigate politics, how to lead, how to—" "I don't want anyone else." His thumbs brushed away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I want the woman who showed up to work with a fever because she was too afraid to rest. I want the woman who burned her hand and kept scrubbing dishes because asking for help felt more dangerous than pain. I want the woman who stood in chains and held her head high when everyone around her was calling for her death. I want you, Sarah, not because the moon chose us, because I choose you." The words hung between us, raw and honest and more terrifying than any trial. "I choose you too." My voice shook, but the words were clear. Certain. Not because I must. Not because of duty or destiny or ancient law. I choose you because you noticed me when no one else did. Because you protected me even when it cost you. Because you wrapped me in your cloak and made me feel like I mattered. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath ragged. "Say it again," he breathed. "I choose you, Kale. Again, I choose you." He kissed me, and the world caught fire. The kiss shattered every carefully constructed wall I'd built around myself. Every defense, every learned habit of making myself small. His mouth moved against mine like he was trying to memorize the taste of me, the shape of me, the way I fit against him. His hands slid from my face to my waist, pulling me closer, and my wolf howled with pure, unfiltered joy. This was what belonging felt like. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone wolf gold again, but there was no fury in them now. Just hunger, want, something that looked dangerously close to worship. "We should—" His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat, tried again. "We should address the pack, formally announce the bond, make it official before the council tries something else?" His jaw tightened. "They won't get the chance. Not after today." "No," I agreed softly. "They won't, because everything had changed. I'd changed. The Omega who'd knelt in chains this morning, silent and powerless, was gone. The Luna marks glowing faintly on my skin proved it. I was still terrified, still uncertain, still learning how to exist in a world where I mattered, where my voice carried weight, where the Alpha King looked at me like I hung the moon. But I was learning, and I was done being silent. 3 days later, the Great Hall was packed again, but this time, I wasn't in chains. I stood beside Kale on the raised platform, wearing a dress that actually fit deep silver that caught the light, making the Luna marks on my skin seem to glow brighter. Someone had braided my hair with threads of moonstone. I looked like I belonged here. I almost believed it. The trials had been swift, brutal. Thorn, Reed, Marcus, and Alpha Dane had all confessed, once they realized silence would only make things worse. The pack had listened to their admissions in horrified silence. The poisoning, the murders, the conspiracy to frame an innocent Omega to cover their crimes. The witnesses who'd lied about me had confessed too, each one explaining how they'd been paid or threatened or promised favor in exchange for their false testimony. My vindication had been absolute, but vindication and acceptance were different things. I could feel the pack's eyes on me now as Kyle addressed them. Some curious, some uncertain, some openly hostile. An Omega Luna. It had never happened before. Never even been considered possible. The moon had other ideas. "The conspirators have been judged," Kale was saying, his voice carrying across the hall. "Councilman Thorne, Councilman Reed, Beta Marcus, and Alpha Dane have been found guilty of murder, conspiracy, and treason. They will be exiled from Packlands. Any who harbor them will face the same fate." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Exile was a death sentence for wolves. Without a pack, they were vulnerable, weak, easy prey for rogues or rival packs. It was also mercy they didn't deserve. But Kale had explained his reasoning to me in private. Executing them would make martyrs, would give their supporters something to rally around. Exile was worse, It removed them from power, stripped them of everything they'd schemed to protect, and left them to survive alone in the very wilderness they'd shown such disdain for. Poetic justice, my wolf had purred. She was awake more often now, stronger, more present. The mate bond had changed her too. The council will be reformed, Kale continued. New members will be chosen not based on bloodline or politics, but on merit, on loyalty, on dedication to the pack's well-being above personal gain. More murmurs. Louder this time, some approving, some not. Change was never comfortable. And finally, Kale turned to me, extending his hand. I took it, and he pulled me forward gently. You're Luna. The hall went silent. I looked out at the sea of faces, hundreds of wolves, all watching, all judging. My wolf stirred. Not afraid. Ready. I know what you're thinking, I said, and my voice strengthened by the mate bond, by Kale's presence beside me, by the Luna marks that proved my right to stand here carried across the hall. An Omega as Luna. It's unprecedented. Impossible. Wrong. Someone in the crowd nodded. At least they were honest. I thought the same thing. I continued. When the marks appeared, when the bond manifested, my first thought was that there had been some mistake, that the moon had gotten it wrong, because I was nothing, nobody, just an Omega trying to survive another day. I paused, letting the words settle, but the moon doesn't make mistakes. And I wasn't nothing. I was just treated like I was. There's a difference. Kale's hand tightened on mine, encouraging. I've scrubbed these floors. I gestured to the stone beneath our feet. I've served your meals. I've washed your clothes and cleaned your chambers and been invisible in every corner of this fortress. And in all that time, do you know what I learned? Silence. They were listening. I learned who was kind when no one was watching. I learned who treated servants with dignity and who saw us as disposable. I learned which of you shared food when someone was hungry, and which of you enjoyed watching others suffer. My eyes swept the crowd. I know this pack better than any alpha raised in luxury ever could. I know its heart, and I know it's capable of better than what happened to me. Movement in the crowd. Uncomfortable shifting. What happened to me was injustice, I said clearly. But what happened before me, the casual cruelty, the accepted hierarchy that says some wolves matter more than others just because of how they were born, that's been happening for generations. And it ends now. Gasps rippled through the hall. You want a Luna who knows how to navigate politics? I've survived politics my entire life. I just survived them from the bottom instead of the top. You want a Luna who understands struggle? I've lived it. You want a Luna who will fight for this pack? My voice strengthened. I'll fight for every Omega, every servant, every wolf who's been told they don't matter. Because they do matter. We all matter. The silence that followed my words felt different, heavier, thoughtful. Then someone started clapping. I couldn't see who at first. The crowd was too thick. But others joined in. Slowly. Then faster. Until the sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder. Not everyone was clapping. Some faces remained stony, arms crossed, unconvinced. But enough were. Enough that it felt like possibility instead of impossibility. Kale stepped forward, and the clapping died away. 3 days ago, you watched the moon mark my mate, he said. You saw proof undeniable, absolute proof that she is chosen, that she belongs at my side. Some of you accepted it immediately. Others are still struggling. His eyes swept the crowd. I understand that. Change is hard, especially change that challenges everything you thought you knew. He pulled something from his pocket, a circlet of silver, delicate and beautiful, woven with moonstones that matched the threads in my hair. The Luna crown. My breath caught. But here's what I need you to understand, Kale continued, his voice hard. Sarah is my mate, my Luna, my equal. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who threatens her threatens the entire pack. And anyone who thinks her Omega birth makes her weak. He looked at me, and the pride in his eyes made my chest tight. You didn't see her stand in chains and refuse to beg. You didn't hear her demand truth in an interrogation room. You didn't watch her face down the wolves who tried to kill her without flinching. He turned back to the pack. I did. And I'm telling you right now, she's the strongest wolf I've ever met. He lifted the circlet, and my hands trembled as I knelt. This was it. The moment that made everything real. Kale placed the crown on my head with reverence, his fingers lingering in my hair. Rise, Luna Sarah, he said softly, and let them see what strength really looks like. I stood, and the weight of the crown settled like it had always belonged there. The crowd erupted. Not everyone was cheering, but enough were. Enough that the sound washed over me like a wave, powerful and overwhelming and real. I was Luna, not because I'd been born into privilege, not because I'd schemed or fought or clawed my way to power, because the moon had chosen me, because Kyle had chosen me, because I'd chosen myself. Later, when the ceremony had ended and the crowd had dispersed, some celebrating, some grumbling, all adjusting to the new reality, Kale found me on the balcony overlooking the territory. The moon was full overhead, bathing everything in silver light. My marks seemed to pulse in response, like they were connected to that distant celestial body in ways I was only beginning to understand. Regrets? Kale asked, sliding his arms around my waist from behind. I leaned back into his warmth. About which part? Any of it. All of it. His chin rested on top of my head. This morning you were Omega. Tonight you're Luna. That's a lot of change for one person. This morning I was in chains, I corrected. Tonight I'm free. I think I can handle the rest. I felt him smile against my hair. That's my mate. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight paint shadows across the territory. Our territory now, our pack. They'll challenge you, Kale said eventually. Not all of them have accepted this. Some never will. I know. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. I turned in his arms to face him. But I've survived worse than court politics. I survived being Omega in a pack that saw me as disposable. I survived false accusations and chains and a trial designed to kill me. I can survive a few disapproving council members. His hands cupped my face. That gesture I was growing to love. You're remarkable. I'm terrified, I admitted, every day, every moment. I wake up and I have to remind myself that this is real, that I'm allowed to be here, that I'm not going to be dragged back to the kitchens and told it was all some cosmic mistake. It's not a mistake. His forehead pressed against mine. You were always meant to be here. The moon knew. I knew, even if I didn't understand why. You were always meant to be mine. And you were always meant to be mine, I whispered back. The kiss we shared tasted like moonlight and promise and forever. When we finally pulled apart, I was smiling. Actually smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't felt on my face in years, genuine and unguarded, and full of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. You know, I said, running my fingers along the collar of his shirt, chains really aren't my color. He laughed, the sound deep and rich and surprised. No? No. I think I prefer silver crowns. Good. He pulled me closer. Because you're going to be wearing one for a very long time. They dragged me into that hall in chains, broken and accused, expected to die on my knees like the weak Omega they thought I was. They were wrong. I walked out as Luna, head high, spine straight, marks glowing on my skin like proof of the moon's favor. Unbroken, despite everything they did to break me. Unbowed, despite a lifetime of being forced to lower my head. And loved fiercely, completely, impossibly by the one wolf in the entire world who'd seen me when I was invisible. The Omega who scrubbed floors became the Luna who would reshape the pack. The girl who survived on scraps became the woman who would ensure no one else had to. The wolf they tried to destroy became the one who would build something better from the ashes. I was Luna Sarah, and this was only the beginning. Thank you for listening to another emotional, magical shifter romance here on Tina Romance Library. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful, heart-gripping romance stories.